Do the shit until they murder me.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another WoT Console video. My name is Zach and today's video is about the Alpine Tiger. The WZ-111, I believe is what it is. Is it the 111 1G? Let's check out the name before I keep going. The WZ-111. Yes, I got that one right. So many WZs in the game, it's not even funny. And as always, we're going to be starting off with the in-game model of the tank, and boy oh boy, I gotta say, the Alpine Tiger is probably now one of my favorite looking tanks in the game. This is probably only going to compete with, let's see, there's the Dragon that came out, the Dragon Type 62 has a cool looking turret, but this one, comparing that to like the Panzer 58 Mutz, which is the bear, the Tiger on this just pops out a whole lot more, and it's so much more detailed with all those little the grass being modeled there. There's a little bit etchings, both tigers on each side, and they're actually in different, you can see they're actually slightly different on each side. They're not the same modeled on each side of the tank. They're actually fairly different when you start looking at the details on it. And I have to say, congratulations to you guys. This is a great looking tank in this game. Even the way the tails wrap around on the end is different. And I just gotta say, hats off, Wargaming. But rather than keep adoring the tank, let's head over into the tank comparison sheet and talk about some statistics this time. So going into the Alpine Tiger's WZ-111 tank comparison, we're going to be comparing it to its Russian counterpart, the IS-6. Now I say counterpart in a slightly different tone. The reason I chose it IS-6 was because they both tanks get preferential matchmaking, although the Alpine Tiger takes more of its looks from the T10 or previously known IS-8. So keep that in mind while comparing these tanks. So the firepower stat for the Alpine Tiger is 39, beating out the 37 on the IS-6. Both tanks, however, use a 122 millimeter caliber gun on it, but the IS-6 has a slightly better reload of 11.7, beating out the 12.5 on the Alpine Tiger. Now with a better reload, you have a better base rate of fire, 5.13 on the IS-6 with 4.8 on the Alpine Tiger. So the IS-6 is starting to take it, even though it has just a slightly lower firepower stat. Now, this might interest you a little bit because you see that normally I highlight the stat that tends to win on the spreadsheet or the Excel sheet that you're watching. The penetrations on both standard rounds for the Alpine Tiger and the IS-6 is 175. On their HE rounds, they both have 61 millimeters of penetration. However, where these tanks differ is their choice of premium rounds. The Alpine Tiger has a choice of heat round, which bumps the penetration up to 250. However, the IS-6 only gets bumped up to 217 millimeters of penetration because its choice of premium ammunition is the APCR round. So you do get a slightly better shell velocity on that. However, that penetration on the heat rounds definitely tend to pay off a little bit better as far as ammunition goes. APCR, I feel, is a more sniping round, while the heat rounds are better for taking down your enemies more efficiently with its higher penetration and ability to not lose penetration over distance, while APCR loses it faster. That's a different talk in ammunition cases. Keep moving on, we go over to damage. Now damage for both tanks are the same, 390 for its AP and in their cases premium rounds, and 530 for its HE rounds if it manages to penetrate. The shell cost, however, both rounds on their standard AP rounds will cost you 1,025 silver. Both rounds for their HE rounds will cost you 608. But however, when you're playing the IS-6 and you have your choice of premium ammunition loaded and fired, it will only cost you 4,800 silver. A heat round is normally better in most cases. However, that means more costs. With 5,600 silver, you can definitely weigh it out that the IS-6 will have a little bit more profitability with its premium rounds than the Alpine Tiger would. However, the shell velocity on its standard rounds and HE rounds is just slightly better, with 800 meters a second on its AP and HE rounds for the Alpine Tiger, and 790 for meters a second for the IS-6 on its AP and HE. However, again, one of the benefits of APCR is it starts out with a shell velocity of 988 on its APCR rounds. They're better rounds. They're supposed to go faster. However, they lose more penetration over distance. So when you fire APCR rounds for a little bit of a snapshot, just keep that in mind. Heat rounds, although they are slow, they don't lose penetration over distance, so 640 meters a second will still carry the 250 meters of penetration over the distance, so you have a higher chance of being able to penetrate. APCR just goes down really fast. The ammo capacity for both tanks, the Alpine Tiger wins with 45, the IS-6 is limited to 30, and I feel like this is one of the reasons why I don't necessarily like the IS series of tanks. They have great alpha, and then some of them come with great penetration. However, their ammunition capacity is always on the lower end of the scale, which tends to drive me away from them. In this case, the Alpine Tiger has a little bit better loadout modifying or modification capabilities than the IS-6. Whether you want to add more premiums, dab in a little bit more for the HE, or just decide to go with all AP rounds, non-premiums, that's also a great choice to be able to earn or increase the profitability of this tank. DPM for it unfortunately goes down to 1,872. Not the best for tier 8s, but definitely I don't believe that's the worst. The IS-6 has a 2,000.7 DPM overall. Again, that's because of the rate of fire, the reload, and unfortunately, this is where I think the stat is a little bit different. Would be because if you choose to fire the premium round, you'll definitely have the penetration. Whereas even if you fire the premium round on the IS-6, the DPM, as far as being able to penetrate some of the tier 8s, tier 9 tanks, the Alpine Tiger with its heat rounds will definitely put up a better fight, but both tanks with preferential matchmaking, you're normally top tier in majority of your games. You're just going to enjoy playing both tanks in that case, and the DPM will only slightly be noticeable, as you'll pretty much still be doing that 390 alpha either way. Moving on, we have the aim time for both tanks. Now, the aim time on the Alpine Tiger is actually 3 seconds. That's really good for a 122, and this is very close to some of the tank destroyer levels of aim time. The IS-6 and most of the IS series suffer with a larger aim time, as you can see, 3.4 seconds definitely is common among the 122s. 0.44 in dispersion beats out the 0.46 at 100 meters than the Alpine Tiger to the IS-6. 0.64 when moving the tank will beat out the 0.68 when moving the tank on the IS-6. And 0.8 when rotating the turret will actually, from the IS-6, will actually beat out the 0.82 when rotating the turret on the Alpine Tiger. So the IS-6 definitely has the advantage when rotating the turret. However, overall, the dispersion for the Alpine Tiger is better suited than the IS-6. Going into the gun elevation, you have 23 degrees of gun elevation on the Alpine Tiger, with only 20 degrees on the IS-6. However, the Alpine Tiger is limited to 5 degrees of gun depression, and that's very common among most of the Russian heavies and Chinese heavies, while in this case, the IS-6 actually has that extra 1 degree of 6 degrees of gun depression on it, and it might not seem like that big a deal, but for those of you who enjoy your gun depression, the Chinese line as well as the Russian line is kind of the nations that you definitely want to stay away for. I have my troubles playing with them majority of the time. Moving on, we have the hull traverse speed. Both tanks have a great hull traverse speed for a heavy tank at 26. However, the turret traverse on the Alpine Tiger with 26 beats out the 24 on the IS-6. Mobility stat is 22 on the Alpine Tiger and 15 on the IS-6. And it's very interesting because the first thing you'll notice is that the engine power is at 600, which loses out to the 700 horsepower engine that is actually on the IS-6. Now the IS-6 has a better horsepower to ton weight ratio with 13.59, beating out the 13.48 ever so slightly on the Alpine Tiger. The 5% chance will actually feel a lot more comfortable on the Alpine Tiger with only 12%, beating out the IS-6's 15%. Now don't get it wrong, the 15% is fairly low, but an added 3% less for the Alpine Tiger is definitely a great chance or an opportunity for you to be able to swap out the fire extinguisher for either consumable or secondary med kit or secondary repair kit. Your choice in that. Majority of the times, whenever the 5% chance for these tanks are really low, a lot of people will just swap it out for the nation consumable. If that's not your choice, you at least have a little bit more inconceivable tastes. So the top forward speed of the Alpine Tiger is at 50 kilometers. Now I said that it is modeled out after the T10, and this is where you can see it as the T10/IS-8 was definitely one of those more mobile heavy tanks, while the IS-6 is limited to 35. This comes along more in the IS series than most people would think. However, I do like the top speed of the Alpine Tiger. You can get into situations with your heavy tank a lot better, or positions I should say, not situations. It does help in situations being able to move a little bit further away from the battle if you so need, but that forward speed will definitely help you. The top reverse speed on it is 15 kilometers. It's only 1 kilometer better than the IS-6, but most of the time, if you're driving this tank in reverse, you're doing it wrong. Unless you're reverse side scraping, in which case, congratulations, you're definitely one of the top players if you're reverse side scraping. The terrain ground resistance on this tank is actually very good, with 1 on hard beating out the 1.2 on the IS-6 on hard, 1.1 on the Alpine Tiger beating out the 1.5 on the IS-6 on medium terrain, and 2.2 on soft terrain for the Alpine Tiger beats out the 2.3 on the IS-6. Now while it does have a better engine and power to weight ratio, the Alpine Tiger has better ground resistance, and I believe that's the reason for the better mobility stat in that case, along with that great top forward speed. It's definitely a better tank to drive in most cases. Survivability stat is at 55, and only by 2, beating out the 53 on the IS-6. However, both tanks are pretty much tier 8 premium heavies, which get locked in around 1,550 hit points. That's very common. 1,500 I believe is pretty much standard, so 50 extra hit points than most of the tier 8s still isn't bad. The overall armor thickness of the Alpine Tiger just beats it out, with 250 being millimeters of armor thickness being the thickest part. Now I'm pretty sure this is around the gun mantlet, but it's not really on the turret itself. Wait, no, that doesn't sound right. 250 millimeters is the thickest part, and I believe that is the gun mantlet, so keep that in mind whenever you see the full armor thickness. The IS-6 has a max armor thickness of 200 millimeters, and again, I'm not sure exactly. I assume, again, it's around the gun mantlet, where the thickest part of the armor is. The front of the hull for the Alpine Tiger is 120, beating out the IS-6's 100. The size of the hull for the Alpine Tiger is 120 millimeters, and the IS-6 is 100. Both tanks have a rear hull armor thickness of 60. The turret of the Alpine Tiger is 230 in the front, beating out the IS-6 is 150. The size of the turret on the Alpine Tiger is 120, and that loses out to the sides of the IS-6, as that has 150 millimeters of armor thickness on the sides, 60 millimeters on the rear of the turret for the Alpine Tiger, and 100 millimeters on the IS-6. Now, before we move on, I just want to point out that even though this is the overall armor thickness for these tanks on their respective areas, that does not count or take into consideration the effective angling of the tank. Now, the T10 in the front, as this is most common among the IS series, the IS-3, the IS-7, previously the IS-8. They have the pike nose for their tanks in the front of the hull, so the effective armor is great on the top of the hull when you don't angle the tank or don't side scrape with it, as that whichever angle you're side scraping at the front of the hull, the top part becomes weak. The IS-6 actually takes after the IS-4 in this case, where it has a flatter front or more steeper angle without a pike nose. So it does have a good angling and armor angling on the sides as well as the front and the turret. So the effective armor thickness on these tanks can range a little bit differently. The Alpine Tiger just has thicker armor in certain areas. That's just me giving you guys a pointer in case you're wondering why it might seem like misinformation when I tell you the armor thickness compared to when you actually play. This applies to any tank, not just these tanks. Keep that in mind whenever you play this game. Concealment stat for the Alpine Tiger is 23 and the IS-6 is at 20. Now keep in mind that the concealment stat for heavy tanks is always poorly low. The 0.14 on the when stationary and 0.08 when moving for the Alpine Tiger is because it comes naturally with a camo. It's a hero tank. The IS-6 that I have in this model or this comparison sheet is just a base IS-6 with no camouflage on it, or not considering the IS-6 Black Edition that does have a similar camo rating on it as the Alpine Tiger. Keep that in mind, but again, most of the time your heavies are in the front lines or where they should be, so their concealment stat really shouldn't apply in most cases. The spotting stat for the Alpine Tiger is at 78, beating out the 62 on the IS-6. And that's because the base view range on the Alpine Tiger is 380, while it's 350 for the IS-6. And that's more common among Russian tanks. I'm not too sure how the 112 or the... What is it? The 112, the T-34-3... I'm not sure how their view range is. I know Chinese and Russian tanks tend to be the same in most cases, but again, it's good to see that the base view range on this tank is slightly better. With 380, be able to get some tanks a little bit more of a distance. However, again, they're both heavy tanks. Get up in their faces. Radio range, the base radio range for the IS-6 with 730 finally takes a win over the 600 on the Alpine Tiger. Now, where tank costs and premium bonuses are concerned, that's how people choose their tanks. 15,175 gold is the base value for the Alpine Tiger without any premium ammunition, 100% trained crew garage slot. However, as in most of these tank reviews, as I explained, whenever they go on sale, Wargaming normally adds these in, and that seems to cause the tank cost to inflate a little bit, which is more common for those of you who are still fairly new to it. So if you see the 15,175 gold and said, well, it's cheaper in the store, well then just keep that in mind. That's just a base tank with no additives. However, the IS-6 is in the Russian tech tree. you can literally just go to the tech tree and purchase this tank for 11,800 gold at any point if you have a free garage slot as well as a crew to be able to put into it of your choosing, or being able to use it as a crew trainer. The IS6 in that case just gives you more chances and opportunities to purchase it. Now, premium bonuses is where, again, most people choose their tanks. 57% on its silver bonus for the Alpine Tiger, and 15% on its experience bonus. The IS6 has 50, as well as the premium bonus experience is limited to 10. So you can see that the Alpine Tiger definitely has a slight advantage with its premium bonuses. However, in most cases, it all comes down to what your playstyle is. The top forward speed of that tank will definitely be a little bit more effective, as you'll see from the gameplay a little bit later on. Than the IS6 being able to get up into positions and or move and get into a different position is definitely one of those things that kind of attracts me to a heavy tank if it's a little bit more mobile. However, that's enough of this one. We're going to head over into the in-game armor model viewer for you guys to check some of that out before we head off into the gameplay. So let's head over there now. So, going into the armor model viewer in game, I'm going to show you guys a quick run through of how the armor can be effectively used in this tank. Now, if you're familiar with the IS6, then you're pretty much going to be a little bit better off with this. However, because it's in the T10 shape right here, you can clearly see that this is pretty much where the difference between the IS6 and the, I guess IS3, because the IS3 carries the same hull design, but remember, this is based off the T10. So, keeping that in mind, anything from right about this corner right here, all along here, will give you around, let's say, I think it was 380 millimeters of effective armor. So you're pretty much going to get ricochets with anything aimed towards this side. However, anything from here, remember I'm marking it off, inwards, this is where most of the IS series tends to be falling behind, as this area becomes pretty much penetratable by anything with 200 millimeters of penetration. I think you only need about 195 actually, to be honest. So that's something to keep in mind when you guys are trying to side scrape. The IS series really isn't meant to be side scraped. The IS6 can side scrape very well. That's because the front of it's actually a lot more flat. However, because it has that IS3 IS3 T10 kind of designed in the front with the pike nose, that tends to give it a little bit more. However, the entire front is about 120 millimeters of armor thickness, so most of your tier 7s and 6s will have a hard time going through it frontally. Unless they start doing into some premium rounds that start reaching up to about 180, 185 millimeters of penetration. Frontally, they will start going in if you don't angle it. So just slightly angling it will help you. This right here is still giving you a pretty decent angle, but anything again with 200 millimeters of penetration will pretty much go through the front. Now as long as you hold down, your frontal turret here will basically become a ricochet. However, you can see right above that you have that line, and with only 5 degrees of gun depression, this becomes a little bit tricky because you still have these cupolas on top that if someone just takes their time, aims carefully, they'll pretty much just go right for it, and they're pretty much flat. To a sense, they're slightly angled, so you might pull off some ricochets. Then again, if you keep your tank moving, you can get the ricochets fairly easy. But if you just stand still because you think you're in a better position, someone will eventually just prove you wrong and snipe right through the hatches right on top. This area right here is slightly penetratable. Again, that's anything over with 200 millimeters and above in penetration. you'll pretty much go right through the top. Most of the taller tanks should be able to just aim down, but you don't necessarily have to force yourself to aim at this section. Just aim for the hatches if you're already that. Aiming that carefully, it's only a matter if someone's moving. And half the time, again, if you're an Alpine Tiger driver, keep in mind premium rounds are pretty much going to be flying your way if people give up after a while, because that's pretty much become the common thing now. The tracks will absorb most of your shots if you're familiar with the T10. You know, a lot of the Soviets on the side tend to have that, thick track armor. It just becomes trollish at times, and you can see that there's this slight part right here that is still considered spaced armor. You can see it right here. This section is spaced, so whenever you're aiming at it, you can try to aim right above it for this side, or just aim directly in the corners. This will be shot, this will damage it. Damage and tracking right there in the gears, of course, and there's that slight section right here. Just remember, you need enough penetration to be able to go through it. If not, the tracks absorb the shot. The rear is the top of it's slightly angled, so you will get some of these weird ricocheting shots. Whether or not that depends on, someone could be angled up for some reason. You didn't aim here, you aimed to the top. You'd be surprised. I happen to end up having that happen to me more than often, only because sometimes I get too used to hitting the auto aim button, letting the tank turn the turret, and then just zooming in and shooting, and without carefully aiming the shot. So that's one thing to keep in mind there. However, I've rambled on long enough. Let's head over into the gameplay. So we're going to be having today's battle on, you know what, I don't remember what map this is. I'm horrible with maps right now. I know what it is, I just don't remember it offhand. Abbey, there you go. I knew it was familiar, I just can't remember it specifically. Now, I just want to clearly point this out, that I forget about those every time, that I am not the best Chinese tank driver. So keep that in mind with any of the gameplay you're about to see. I do still love watching the Alpine Tiger in general. I was still amazed, and every game I played with it, I kept going around it just because I like seeing the Tigers on the side. However, this time, on this particular night, I was pretty much having probably one of the worst nights I've had in quite a while, which is what initially put me in my taking a break from World of Tanks and just not trying to be too much of a negative player. This tank was pretty much the cause of that, so I hope you guys still enjoy the video. So, I'm joined by my friends 0F115, clanmates as well, and Slayer Potato. I still love saying his name every time. And right off the bat, I kind of made a mistake by jumping up into this position and derping a shot right into the ground. And I get pushed quite heavily by the Leo. However, I can shave off more of his hit points than he can of mine in one shot. That I believe the top average damage on that is 240, while mine does 390. And I was still quite rolling decently up until the point where the IS-3 decided to scare me. Now you will see the front of this tank, again, like I pointed out in the armor model viewer, this tank is based off of the T10, where the IS-8 is, as some of the veteran players will remember it as. That's one of the things that I do improperly when I drove this tank, is that I end up angling it and keep forgetting about the front pike nose, kind of being more of a forward facing, keeping your front hull facing the enemy. And I do something a little bit more stupid in this case, where I decided to go and actually got lucky. The IS-3 in that case just bounced off the side of the tank. Keep in mind, by the way, on the mini-map right here, you'll notice that a heavy tank was spotted and was basically just slowly pushing through. You'll notice him at the end of the game, and pretty much the reason I ended up becoming a little bit salty after this. Again, the IS-3, both of us just derp shots into the ground. However, he decides to push me a lot more uses his premium fire extinguisher, and I decide to run right into the water. He penetrated that shot, and I'm on 451 hit points of this, and this is still fresh within what 3 minutes of the game. This definitely, again, I wasn't really enjoying playing the tank all that much. However, as much as I tried to push for good games, whether when my team did good, I would die, and in this case, this was one of the few games where things tended to even out towards the end of the game. So now you notice that most of the tanks ended up pushing straight through the middle, as now I think that's become more of a common strategy. So I decided to pull back and go and help the base, as the tank destroyers were pretty much falling apart on the base, and our team in the middle were dying left and right. My clanmates and I were still alive, so we decided to push back. And again, one of the things I have to stress about the Alpine Tiger is the dispersion on it. The gun is very trollish with that Soviet, almost. It uses the same gun as the Soviet tanks. It's almost too derpy for me that I always feel like it's it's one of those things that trolls me more than I'd like to admit. And the dragon penetrates me. Now, I do something a little bit. I pushed up with everybody, with Zero and Slayer Potato being a little bit further from me. However, that dragon decided to do a little bit more, to where he was just pushing up against heavy, and so I decided to right there stop aiming, stop auto aiming, and just turn the turret and do a freehand shot. Now, here's a difference, and one thing you guys who are Alpine Tiger drivers should keep in mind. The front of the turret is very strong, and I mess up right there because I was trying to aim at the front of his hull, which would have been penetrated, but I aim at the gun instead, or I hit the gun. Now you'll see right there, that's the point that you want to aim for if your Alpine Tiger is over angling. Again, the IS-3 is the same thing. However, on this tank, it's a lot less effective armor, so you'll be able to penetrate it with the 175 millimeters of penetration that I had straight through the top of that hull. And unfortunately for him, he didn't know where to aim on the front. I think he tried to snipe the turret, and that just didn't pay any. That didn't help him at all. So, if you'll notice at the bottom of the map, Slayer Potato in his freedom is all the way on the bottom. I believe this Grunt of Spades was asking me about the tank, and because of me being a little bit salty about everything, I just ignored it at the time, and messaged him afterwards about the tank. He was just asking if the tank was worth it, and in my opinion, based on sheer looks, I would buy it because I did. Based on playability, well, you guys are always the judge of that on your own time. Slayer Potato unfortunately got surrounded, so I had to pull back around and help my buddy 0F115, who by some miracle managed to get himself stuck in a KV5. This one had me laughing pretty bad. Scorpion G, the what is that? The ARL V39 right there. So he's pretty much stuck in that position. He was trying to climb up the hill and ended up messing up. So I go out and I help him, and I got kind of scared right here because I was like, oh well, I'm gonna be stuck. And as soon as he moved KV5 out the way, I was back on my merry way. Now, here's something you definitely don't want to do if you are going against a Yasi and a KV5, two very heavily armored tanks to a tier 6 tank. You just sit there and take shots. Now we're surrounded, it's a 3 versus 5, and the team is pulling up. A Scorpion G is to the south, or in this case, yeah, from the south. In the north end, we have the T95E2, and I believe it's the Motherland, I want to say. Zero decided to push up on the Scorpion G. I decided to cover us over here. T44 100, even with that horrible dispersion, just managed to get sneak a shot right into him. And unfortunately for me, the Zero went down or pulled over into the corner here, and I was trying to push back for the Scorpion G. Now keep an eye on the map. You'll see the T95E2 pulls right back. The Scorpion G is being very hesitant as he doesn't want to push against us. Zero bounces on the T95E2. He starts pushing up, so we're trying to act as a team here and coordinate our attacks. So he pushes up, I push up, and I ended up derping a shot right into the ground. So go for a ram, even on a low hit points, and give myself an extra 100 or 200 millimeters of armor, taking out the T44-100. Good coordinated attack between us. However, 561 from that Scorpion G. Man, that's a high roll for that guy. No, wait, is it 490? No, it's 560 is the average, I believe, on that tank. Scorpion G is one hell of a tank. I love playing that tank. I haven't played it in a while. I might try doing that when I start streaming again. So again, we're trying to coordinate attacks here. I managed to sneak a good shot in there with a decent roll. That was actually a low roll, 388. That Scorpion G got really lucky. However, he's playing it very safe, so we assumed that another tank was right here. And right here is where I want you guys to notice. 4 kills, 3 assists, 6 crits, 4 enemies spotted, 11 damage. This is by far the best game I've had in this tank. Now again, I'm a horrible Chinese tank driver, and that comes into play. Now I will point out my clear mistake in a second when we pull up on this hill. Now you have a tank capping the base, and a Chiri running across trying to get into the base to cap with him. Both of us are heavy tanks. We're on the right side. The KV5 is on the low end, so he has to crawl up. And I am over here on 112 hit points. Take out the Chiri because he was trying to run in. However, this is where my mistake comes in. I noticed it afterwards, but because I was on such low hit points, I was like, okay, this tank is very mobile, has a 50 kilometers top forward speed. I should be able to catch up to the KV5, pass it, and get back into the base. That was where my mistake was, and that is what costs us the game. Spoiler there, we lose by a fraction of a second. This by far was the best game I've had in this tank. 5 kills, 12 pens, 6 crits, 4 spotting. Zero and I were literally just like, what the heck? We got robbed at the last second. And congrats to the enemy OI player here. I tried stopping and taking a shot. That also stopped me. 10 seconds on the clock. I still have the mobility to be able to hit him. KV5 has the height advantage, so he should be able to get into him. And with that shot, did not reset. My shot goes out 370 and does not reset it. We go down in a defeat. And I was pretty much done with it at that point in the end of the night. 3,400 damage, 3,477 damage, 11 pens, 831 assisted, 2,720 damage blocked. This was only a first class mastery badge, and that is because of the loss. I did get the ASOP for the tank, which granted me another 100,000 silver, but that means I made 138,000 silver on just the win. Steel wall because of the amount of damage blocked, 1,159 damage or base experience on a loss. The ARL on our team actually had a really good game too. This, by far, again, is one of the best games I've had in the Alpine Tiger. Now, keep in mind, again, I just pointed out that I'm a horrible Chinese tank driver in general. I guess this is the main reason why I don't travel down the Chinese tank tech tree, and I just want to have you guys take that into consideration when I say I don't enjoy driving the tank. However, the results, if this was a win, it would have probably been an ace tanker, And judging from that, it would have probably been around 17 or 1800 base experience, but that's just off of a guess. I can't give you any definitive. That's just off of normal averaging with a Top Gun being added there. However, that's not to say that the results themselves don't speak for it. The tank, the tank for itself is a great purchase for you if you decide to have 3,600. Okay, so no. The tank itself is a great addition to your garage. One, it's probably the best looking tank we've had in game in quite a while, and that's putting it up against a lot of the tanks. I feel like the Alpine Tiger has pretty much set its own tiger paw print into the game and given its own staple. It's a great looking tank aesthetically. However, one of the downfalls for me is definitely going to be the dispersion on that 122. That's again because basically it has to be a balance. It's using a big 122 caliber gun, which I felt like the T10 doesn't even have that bad of dispersion, but you kind of have to balance it out with the fact that this tank gets preferential matchmaking. Do I recommend it? Yes and no. Yes if you don't have the IS-6. No if you have the IS-6. The reason I say that is because tank for tank, the IS-6 in my opinion would definitely hand the T10 or the Alpine Tiger its belt on the way out, because the IS-6 has better effective armor than the Alpine Tiger. Yes, because yes, I would recommend it because again, it's a great looking tank. It still does drive very well and does give you a great experience for Chinese tanks. Again, I'm just not a fan of Chinese tanks, and that's one of the main reasons why I was a little bit hesitant on putting out so much of the Chinese line with the King Dragon, the Dragon Type 62. I don't think I did. I did a tank review for that one a while back, and the Yasi that I have to do next. Keep in mind, again, these tanks are still good. They handle very well in a good commander's hands. I just did the best with what I could. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully it was helpful for you guys in deciding whether or not to purchase it. Hopefully the statistics provided don't give the tank review a long run time, but again, I can't help that. That tends to happen. And I will catch you guys in the next video, which should be the WoT WZ 121 GFT tank review. Have a great night, guys.